Hello, and welcome to our next session, Simple Tools for Making Our Environments More Nurturing. My name is Patty Pierce-Zidis, and I serve as Assistant Director for ADAPT. We're all here today because we share a common vision, to create a culture of prevention that promotes the well-being of children and adults in society. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce our next set of speakers, prominent prevention scientists, Drs. Anthony Biglan and Dennis Embry, who will share with us pathways to achieving this goal by using simple tools to make meaningful differences in the well-being of others. Dr. Biglan is a senior scientist at Oregon Research Institute. He has devoted his career to studying strategies for preventing substance use, antisocial behavior, and academic failure. His book, The Nurture Effect: How the Science of Human Behavior Can Improve Our Lives and Our World, describes how behavioral science has brought us to a point where it is possible to evolve a society in which virtually every person is living a productive life and carrying relationships with others. And as president of Values to Action, he promotes this work by supporting communities to implement tested and effective preventive programs and policies. Dr. Embry is president and senior scientist at PAXIS Institute in Tucson, Arizona, and co-investigator at Johns Hopkins University and the Manitoba Center for Health Policy. Working to improve the well-being of children, Dr. Embry has created multiple interventions using both cultural wisdom and leading-edge science to prevent multiple problems, including substance use. His work is being used at population level in the United States, Canada, Europe, New Zealand, and Australia. In 2020, the Child Welfare League of America named Dr. Embry as one of 100 people in the last 100 years to improve the well-being of children. Get ready to take notes, folks. This dynamic duo have a wealth of knowledge and strategies to share. Welcome, Drs. Biglan and Embry.
Thank you, Patty. So let me just tell you the whole thing right in one slide. My key message: we cannot prevent substance use simply by targeting that problem. If we want to prevent substance use and substance use disorders, we have to prevent all of the psychological and behavioral problems that are risk factors for substance use. And to do that, we need to ensure that our young people live in environments that nurture the development of all of the psychological and behavioral skills that people need to thrive. And the good news is that we can do it. This is a quote from the National Academy of Medicine report on prevention that was issued in 2009. I was on that committee. And we concluded that the scientific foundation is there to create a nation in which just about every young person arrives at adulthood with the skills, interests, values, and health habits they need to lead a productive life in caring relationships with others. And that's the vision that I've been pursuing since then. That's the vision that prompted me to write The Nurture Effect, which is, I hope, a little more readable than the Institute of Medicine report on prevention, but you could see for yourself. So I've come to think about this in terms of nurturance. And so consilience is an unusual word, but let me explain that. What it is that when a bunch of different disciplines come together and agree on something, that's a consilience. And I would argue that behavior analysis, biology, medicine, public health, social work, social, clinical, and developmental psychology all converge in identifying the environmental conditions that promote versus undermine well-being. And I found it useful to call that nurturance. You can come up with a better term, that's fine. But I do think we need a way of talking about this, that everybody gets it, that we're all on the same page, that we're trying to create environments that are nurturing. And let me tell you what I mean by nurturing. First of all, these are environments that minimize toxic biological and social conditions. Toxic biological conditions like high levels of airborne lead or high levels of omega-6 in the diet, but also social conditions like punishment, coercive social environments. I'll talk more about that because I think that's very important. Second, nurturing environments limit opportunities and influences for problem behavior. They limit opportunities such as kids home alone after school without adult supervision. That's a time that has been shown to be likely that kids, especially when they're with other kids, that they'll try out problem behaviors. They'll get into the liquor cabinet or other kinds of things. So we need to limit those opportunities. But we also need to limit influences for problem behavior, like the marketing of unhealthful food, the marketing of alcohol, the marketing of cigarettes, and other vape products, which are marketed to young people, and that is a problem. And so we need to change that. And we've made some progress in the marketing of cigarettes, but we have a lot more to do. The third thing is we need to richly reinforce diverse forms of pro-social behavior. And I'm not talking about M&Ms and stickers. I'm talking about listening, caring, touching, helping, working with, cooperating with other people, admiring them. These are the kinds of things that people need to thrive. And fourth, we need to promote psychological flexibility, which is a mindful and pragmatic pursuit of one's values, even in the context of troubling thoughts and feelings. We have learned, clinical psychology in recent years has taught us a lot about, it doesn't really work to try to not be anxious or try to not be depressed or try to think this way instead of that way. But it does work to accept that you have all these things going on, these thoughts and feelings, but you don't let your mind rule you. And you're clear about your values and you're pursuing those values, even in the context of troubling thoughts and feelings. And so when I get up every morning and read the headlines in the Washington Post and the New York Times and go, oh my God, and then I come upstairs and I work on this as I'm talking to you. And so the other thing I want to suggest is that the secret of behavior change is reinforcing alternative behavior. It's not trying to damp down or punish behavior we don't want. It's everywhere you look, it's reinforcing the behavior we really want to see. So let me talk a little bit more about toxic social conditions. I suspect that everybody listening to this has heard about the adverse childhood experiences. This is a list of them. You're probably all familiar with them. And what this research has shown is that when people have a number of ACEs, it increases the risk of one or more of the things listed here. And if you could prevent all of these things, you would have a society that's working a whole lot better. And so it's important to understand these risk factors. And if you go back to what some of these risk factors are, I want you to notice how many of them involve aversively treating children. Basically all of them. I mean, even, just every one of these is one in which it increases the likelihood that the kids are being threatened, are being neglected, are being told that they're no good, and so on. And so these are things we need to change. So to summarize that, I've created this little pathway, a pathway from being born to later life. And what we've found, and there's a lot of research that's been done on this, is that families in which there are a lot of coercive social interactions, that's a problem. Coercive social interactions are ones in which people use aversive behavior to try and affect somebody else. So mom says, so Johnny, it's time to go to bed. And Johnny says, I don't want to go to bed. And mom backs off. Well, what just happened? Well, mom didn't want to pursue Johnny being like that. And so she backed away, and she was reinforced because he stopped yelling, right? He was reinforced because he ain't going to bed. And so families that are stressed are more likely to have these kinds of coercive interactions. And in fact, the two of the biggest stressors are poverty and discrimination. A family that's living in poverty, that has all of the stressors involved in poverty and is experiencing discrimination, those families are more likely to have these kinds of coercive interactions. Well, in those families, the problem is that kids do not develop the kind of self-regulation that they need to have to succeed in life. Self-regulation in the sense of, I'm angry, but okay, I can take a deep breath and I can do what'll work for me rather than just lash out at somebody. And so kids who don't develop that good self-regulation are more likely to be aggressive and uncooperative. And when they get to school, they're more likely to fail academically because they don't do what the teacher asks them to do. They're also more likely to fail socially because peers will reject them because they're aversive. They may be bullying, they may be angry, they may be withdrawn, but they don't develop good social relations. What happens when you get into middle school or early adolescence is that kids who have been rejected in this way meet other kids, and it's magic. Suddenly they found somebody that they get along with, and they get along with each other around things about how other people are treating them badly. And so one of the, I think, most important studies in this area was done by Tom DeShawn, who studied kids in early adolescence, and he asked a kid who was considered at risk to come in and bring a friend, and they had him talk about things that kids that age would like to talk about. And what they discovered was that if a kid talked about deviant behavior and the other kid laughed, deviant talk, laughter, deviant talk, laughter, that was predictive of kids being arrested 2 years later. He was watching the making of a delinquent youth. And so these deviant peer groups become a training ground for problem behaviors. And so antisocial behavior is more likely, drug abuse is more likely, but so is depression, as kids are not getting the kind of warmth and reinforcement they need. And also early child rearing is more likely. And think about this from an evolutionary perspective. In a dangerous world, you better have your babies early, or you may not have them at all. And so this seems to be one of the ways in which humans can develop in the context of an aversive and threatening environment. So we need to change these environments. We need to help people adopt more nurturing environments. Now, you notice also I put the CVD, cardiovascular risk. The reason I put that there is because all of these experiences, including just the stressful interactions as a child, contribute to cardiovascular disease. We spend 95% of our healthcare dollars treating people for problems like diabetes and cardiovascular disease, but we could prevent these things if we could prevent kids from growing up in these kinds of environments. So this is also from the 2009 report on prevention, and this shows the developmental phases at the top. And every one of these bracketed items refers to one or more interventions that have been shown to have a beneficial effect. And I'll say several things about them. One is that most of these interventions prevent multiple problems. Well, how do they prevent multiple problems? By changing the environment that produces those problems. Also, most of these interventions show benefit long after the intervention has been presented. So for example, early childhood interventions, home visiting for supporting moms of at-risk moms and so on, has been shown to reduce delinquency in adolescence. And the third thing is that if you go to the Washington State Institute for Public Policy, you will discover that virtually all of these interventions save more money than they cost. And so I'm basically saying we have all of these things can make a difference. And so you guys are in many ways the future of this country. And to the extent that you can extend these programs and practices that I'm going to talk about in a minute, you can help to make everybody's environment, including your own, more nurturing, and as a result, prevent these problems and help people to thrive. So here's a list of 8 family interventions that have been shown to have benefits. If you look at the impact of these, you will see that they have multiple benefits. And all of these are programs that have been developed and tested in randomized trials. And you should be working to ensure that your community is reaching the families that can benefit from these programs. And then there are 8 more. This is a paper by Leslie et al. And if you send me an email at tony@ori.org, I can send you the paper. So the point is that we have these family interventions, and to the extent that we can get them implemented, we can make a difference in communities. But there are also schools that have programs that have been proven to work. There are professional development programs for preschool providers that help the preschool providers to become more nurturing. Instead of telling kids what they should do, they join the child around what they're doing, and they help to extend their learning around the thing that the child is paying attention to at the time. There's positive intervention, behavioral intervention and support that's in 26,000. Well, actually, I talked to somebody the other day, it's up to about 30,000 schools. There's promoting alternative thinking strategies, the PATHS program, and positive action, and the good behavior game and cooperative learning, too, that we, my organization, Values to Action, has been working to try and help schools adopt. And there's also meaningful roles, that kids who are given meaningful roles in school, that can be a preventive intervention because it's helping them to develop skills and to feel like they're making a contribution to the people around them. But I want to talk about kernels. Okay, so this is a matter of going beyond programs, or maybe thinking about it in terms of looking inside those programs. Because if you look inside those programs, you'll find that they contain a set of simple behavior influence techniques. Family programs are expensive, and they are often more than a family needs. School curricula on substance use are often resisted by schools because they take time away from academic subjects. Kernels are simple, proven behavior influence techniques. They're key ingredients in the Pax Good Behavior Game and Pax Tools, which Dennis is going to talk about. And I would argue that as people become skilled at using them, they have a way to spread nurturance throughout a community. And one of the things that Dennis and I are working on is seeing if we can get this to the level of even, adults using these kinds of skills to make their relationships with each other more nurturing. And if you want a copy of the paper on kernels, if you are quick, you can get out your camera and take this QR code, and I'm sure that Laura will make it available if you miss the opportunity. And so this is a paper that summarizes and describes about 50 evidence-based kernels. And so I'm going to go on because I don't want to get the hook. So full disclosure, although the kernels have been well tested in school settings, they're key components of the Pax Good Behavior Game, Pax Tools have not been as fully evaluated. Dennis is going to talk about that. But I think what you should know that my nonprofit, Values to Action, has a contract with PAXIS Institute to evaluate their impact, the impact of the Pax Tools when they're delivered. So if I say something good about the Pax Tools, you should remember that I might have a conflict of interest, and you can, make your own decisions about whether or not to believe me. So I just want to give one example that's not among the ones that Dennis is talking about, although he's been involved in this. It's a kernel for reducing youth access to substance use. When we were doing a randomized trial of a community intervention to try and reduce adolescent smoking, one of the things we wanted to do was reduce youth access to smoking. And what we found out was that police were unwilling to cite clerks for selling to youth. They said we couldn't take that into court. The judge would just throw it out. And so we were struggling to find a way to reduce illegal sales to kids. So what we did was we tried sending out information about these things, and that, we tried to give information to the clerks about it, and that didn't work. And so what we did was we decided that we would try rewarding clerks for not selling. So this is Willamina, Oregon, and this is the proportion of stores that were willing to sell in the 4 baseline time when we hadn't done anything. And after we started rewarding clerks for not selling, you can see that there was a significant reduction in the number of stores that were willing to sell. And here we did it in Prineville, Oregon, and we found the same thing. And in fact, we did it at 8 different communities. And what we found was that there was a very significant reduction in the percent of stores that were willing to sell. All we were doing was rewarding the clerks. We would give them a reward. We would say, this clerk was caught in the act of obeying the Oregon law. The clerks liked it. The community liked it. We got positive publicity, but it also told kids that, that you couldn't get access to cigarettes. So Dennis Embry saw our data and he said, oh, well, I'm working with the state of Wyoming and I think I could help them to reduce the percent of stores willing to sell. So that's what you see in the top half of this thing. And later, Wisconsin wanted the same help from Dennis. And so he introduced the reward and reminder there, and we had a significant impact on the sales there. Dennis is a clever guy, and he added some things to what we had done in our program. One of the issues was that kids would get angry because they couldn't sell, and they might go and key the car of a clerk. And so Dennis asked all of the clerks around the state of Wyoming, and this was when there was a quiz show on where there was final answer was a big thing. So he gets these people to say what the final answer is. And he got some really snappy responses from some of the clerks about things you could say. And then he distributed it to everybody. So now every clerk had a snappy thing to say. Then he put it on a video and did ads so that the kids were seeing what would happen to them if they tried to come into the store. So there were things like, well, I could sell you these cigarettes, but there's a $500 fine for doing it. Now, if you're willing to help me pay that fine, maybe we could do it. So anyway, significant effect on reduction. We've also replicated this in work with alcohol sales, and we can tell you there that rewarding clerks for not selling significantly reduces these sales. And it's a positive way of doing it instead of punishment, which is what we rely on far too much in our efforts to have the world work well. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is action circles. These are small groups of people who come together to work on one well-defined slice of a bigger problem. We've got about 160 people who join Values to Action. And the proposition we've made to them is that if you are concerned about some aspect of the world that you would like to change, but you're unsure how to do it, you could join an action circle and we can work together to figure out what can be done to solve the problem. And you could work on this for maybe 2 months for a couple hours a week and produce a solid product. And that has been working. We've been designing these. We've figured out how we could significantly reduce disparities in reading proficiency, which is a huge risk factor for the future well-being of kids. We've developed one, we're coming out with a guide on how your community could reform the juvenile justice system, not simply by dealing with the people who've offended, but also by preventing this. And we're very excited to offer this to communities and help them create an action circle in the community that would reform juvenile justice. We also have one that's coming out with a guide for how we can get behaviorally skilled personnel working in healthcare settings. That's particularly relevant to helping children with developmental disabilities, because they often don't get the health care that they need because they have to be sedated to have a blood draw or to do a test. And behaviorally skilled people can help deal with that. And so it's less traumatizing to kids. And we also have a greenhouse gas emissions action circle. In fact, the next hour, I'm talking to one about how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so Values to Action can help your community address any of these problems. And an action circle can help your community spread kernels. And we're actually working with Dennis on how we've trained people to create action circles to spread the kernels that he's going to talk about. And so in summary, you may have been told that your job is just to prevent substance use, but whether your funders know it or not, they will not get what they want unless you help your communities come together around a clear goal of preventing the entire range of psychological and behavioral problems of young people. Focus on creating social environments in families, schools, and communities in which each person feels accepted and cared for. And I highly recommend looking at the Communities that Care as a model for doing that. And finally, a community whose members become adept at using kernels can help to nurture the well-being of everyone. And hey, in the process, you should care for yourself. So I'm done talking. And if you want to join Values to Action and you have your camera handy, you can go to our website and join us. We think we can help to make a significant difference in making our society more nurturing. And I think I'm done talking, and I'm going to leave this up as long as I can. So someone will now direct me to stop sharing, I suppose. I think it's Dennis's turn.
Oh, okay, let's see, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. I don't know if I'm up or not.
I can see it.
Okay,
I think you're good.
all right. Are you set? Okay, should I just go ahead? I guess so.
Go for it.
Awesome, thank you very much. So I want to talk about these fundamental and practical units for behavior change. Often we think of these things in such complex ways, and what we have developed, Tony and I, is the notion of evidence-based kernels, which are the smallest units of scientifically proven behavior change. And you can use those small kernels to better our world. So imagine, you know, the whole discovery of DNA came out when I was a small child. And there are 4 amino acids. And what does that describe? All life on this planet. I can't vouch for whether or not it codes life on other planets or other solar systems. But here on this planet, those 4 amino acids in some combination can make just about anything. But imagine that there are small units of behavioral influence that can, in fact, change behavior in almost manifold ways. So there are 4 attributes of these small units of behavioral influence, which we call kernels. An antecedent kernel, that's something that happens before a behavior, signaling it. So for example, a traffic light is that. Then there's relational frame kernels. Tony's been talking about that. A relational frame is something, oh, we could talk about, oh, that was good or that was bad. That was effective, that was not effective. Those are things that code particular outcomes so that we have a kind of slide rule or a quick judgment about what things are, how they might help us. And of course, humans need reinforcement kernels. They need dopamine. That's the stuff that drives our brain in terms of what we choose as behaviors for frequency, duration, etc. And then there are physiological kernels. There are small units of behavioral influence that arise from physiological aspects. And I'll talk a little bit about those. Now, nature is completely conciliant and compact. So the evidence-based kernels must influence at least one of these outcomes. The change in frequency of behavior, the intensity of behavior, or the duration of behavior, and or change biological functions, including gene expression. Whoa, do you mean that we can change gene expression by behavioral interactions? Yes, and I can show you more about that. So a kernel is the smallest unit of proven behavioral influence shown in experimental analysis. And there are multiple kinds of studies that you can do this. Now, if you take away some piece from that, so this is one of our kernels that we use in our classroom, this harmonica. If you take away the harmonica, it simply doesn't work as well. If you take away the hand signal, it doesn't work as well. So that very simple thing is indivisible, and removing any part of it makes it inert or less effective. Now, you can read the papers that we've written on these evidence-based kernels. The 2004 paper was the first sort of spear at that, where we're talking about these evidence-based kernels and then behavioral vaccines. Now, what the heck is a behavioral vaccine? Well, I'm sure you all know about it for the last few months. This is a behavioral vaccine. A mask or washing your hands is a behavioral vaccine, or fastening your seatbelt is a behavioral vaccine. But there are things that can happen in homes and schools, et cetera, that are behavioral vaccines. But there's also these very small units of behavioral influence, like this harmonica, or setting the timer for a task in a classroom or at home or at work to complete that task. Though that paper, now the 2008 paper, outlines some 50 evidence-based kernels, which can be used for a broad array of solutions to almost anything that you could imagine. Now, for example, beat the timer. A small timer reduces the time for the task. That gets children or others to do the task faster and more reliably. There's response cost. So if you don't complete the task, maybe there's a penalty point in some manner or fashion. That's certainly true in sports all of the time. A mystery motivator is instead of telling the person what they're actually going to get, making it a surprise is often more effective. Oh, isn't that what they do in casinos? But you can use it in a right way, in a good way, in a non-addictive way. You can use non-verbal cues for transitions. So we use those in classrooms with 3 levels of voice: 0-inch voice, 3-inch voice, sorry, I have 2.5 fingers, or 3-foot voice, or stage voice, a 10-foot voice. Non-verbal transition cues also help. The stop and go, for example, in our classrooms with the good behavior game. We have a simple little cards on the desk so that as a teacher is moving through the classroom and the child is being just a little fidgety, all she has to do or he has to do is just tap that little thing. It says stop spleen. Spleens are unwanted behaviors. They're not necessarily bad. It's just in context that they don't work. Or go Pax. Pax means peace, productivity, health, and happiness in our work with a good behavior game. Meaningful roles, job roles. So the more job roles that kids have in their early life and through adolescence and young adulthood, the better they do in school and classrooms and life. This is a very powerful thing, but now in the modern environment, we don't really have too many meaningful roles for young people. Now, here's another example of a relational frame kernel. I'm sure you've all heard of motivational interviewing. Well, this is a version of motivational interviewing that was funded by NIDA, which is essentially a map of how you might achieve a goal. This is a simple one of those versions. So you would ask a young person or another person, whatever it is that you're working on, what's something that you would really like to achieve? And it could be a short-term goal. You define what a short-term goal is. And it could be a more complicated time thing. Then you want to ask them, well, why do you want to do that? And you dig a little bit. Well, I want to get better grades. Well, why are better grades important to you? Well, I'd really like to go to med school, whatever. And you can then start bridging this. And then what are some of the problems that you might encounter? And then what are the ways that you could deal with those problems? We've used this very simple thing, even with young children, 1st and 2nd graders, to help solve problems. We also used it with adolescents who were arrested for juvenile crimes. And we use this methodology to reduce the probability of recidivation and other problems. So these are examples of one kernel. Okay, another one, positive reinforcement for peer-to-peer notes. AK, they're called Toodles. Toodles means the opposite of tattles. So you can see that the children in the graphic up there were not really being very reinforcing. They had lots of disruptive behaviors. So when the students started toodling, reinforcing each other for pro-social behaviors and inhibition of disturbing behaviors, those problems went down. We reversed it and they went back up. Then we put Toodles back in and they went back down. Now, one of the things I want to tell you is in our work with the good behavior game is that peer-to-peer reinforcement like this is the active ingredient in reducing the lifetime risk of, during teenage years and early adulthood, in suicide. Just noticing kids for doing good from peers, but what are they doing right now on Facebook and other kinds of things? Essentially dissing each other. So that's an example of a reinforcement kernel. It doesn't cost much, it's just pieces of paper. But let's talk about addictions. because this is HIDA and ADAPT that we're talking to. So the single most scientifically proven strategy to reduce addictions over a long period of time is something that NIDA funded called the Prize Bowl. And you can order this book. I don't own the copyright. I didn't contribute to it, but it's Amazon.com by Nancy Petrie, who was a hero to me, because what she shows is drawing little tickets for various recovery related things has a dramatic effect on reducing addictions. And it's something that any community can do. We have done this all over the world in small communities, in indigenous communities, and it's a very powerful thing. This is one of her studies. You can see that the contingency management protocol against regular standard treatment was way more effective. Now, imagine that we started doing this widely in America with our coalitions. We could have a large impact. In fact, in Tucson, we were able to show population level impact on some of these things. Now, Tony's already talked a little bit about the reward and reminder. And I want to emphasize something here. We often, when we're dealing with human behavior problems, we want to know what's the best way to punish people. Don't bank on punishment to get to the promised land. And this is a perfect example. A particular state went over the level of illegal sales of tobacco. And now SAMHSA was about to fine these people, this state, if they didn't bring it below the penalty level of 20% of illegal sales from the tests. So the state said, well, we don't really like this idea of rewarding people for doing good. We should punish them for doing these bad things. But they decided, well, we'll do it in 10 counties out of the 105 counties. And what you see is, oh, the reward and reminder was really effective in reducing illegal sales to minors. But the penalty version did not, and the state had to forfeit some Title IV money because of that. So science matters. Now, evidence-based kernels can be delivered in the context of public health and well-being. Nationwide Children's Hospital has funded a very large expansion of our work with Pax Tools, which Tony was mentioning. Those are small units of evidence-based practices that have a big impact. And they are actually the active ingredients in most educational programs, most parenting programs, and other interventions. So what we've done is created those tools, and we've taught community people how to spread those things across their community. Essentially, we have taught local people how to talk about this. They then talk to their community, and we have the supplies then that are spread out through, could be after school programs, it could be clinical programs, it could be churches. All of those things can be done to spread a specific kernel. And in fact, you can actually download the free Pax Tools app to learn more about it. And this gives you an idea of how you might actually use kernels as a population or public health model. We have actually done that in several instances and seen the impact. What's lovely about it is that it's relatively cost-free, but it also maps to early prevention. It maps to other, and then even treatment things. Now, let's look at kernels in the context of the good behavior game. Tony has already mentioned the good behavior game. And we now have about 27,000 students who've been in these studies. And we are now looking at some of those young people at age 35. We have already shown major reductions in problematic behavior, but most importantly, we've been able to show changes in BDNF gene expression. This is incredible because BDNF is probably the most important neurohormone that is regulating so much that's happening in the brain. So we're able to kind of map where kernels are affecting, like the vision, where people are making a prediction of what they would see, hear, feel, and do more of, and then a sense of identity. We use the harmonica for the transition. We use Premack principles. That's, if there's a bad behavior happening in the classroom, for example, like throwing paper balls, we make that as a prize. So you've got 10 seconds to wad up scrap pieces of paper and have a snowball fight. So we use those principles and then beat the timer as an antecedent. So you narrow down the amount of time that something might happen. Then random calling, which we call Pax sticks, and then Toodle notes, these positive notes between peers. Pax voices, so that we teach teachers in schools to have 0-inch voice, a 3-inch voice, 3-foot voice, and a 10-foot voice. And then Pax hands and feet. Pax hands help. Pax hands, feet help. They never hurt. Okay, not okay. So now we can see them using those evidence-based kernels in the recipe of the good behavior game, which the kids are put on teams and they play the game for a period of time. And if they have 3 or fewer disruptive behaviors, which we call spleens, which makes you smile, they get to win an activity prize. Now, these can be used at home, in the community, and school, and other editions. Now, here's that really interesting thing. Our studies at Johns Hopkins show that we actually have changed gene expression in the young people who went through the good behavior game, that is the version done at Johns Hopkins. That's amazing. BDNF is also one of the things that most of the psychotropic medications try to impact, but you have to take the pill continuously. The behavioral intervention has lifetime effects on phenotype. That's extraordinary. Now, Pax kernels, Pax tools can be widely disseminated. So parents, grandparents, caregivers, foster parents can use those. It's a very simple little booklet that we have that tells you how to do it. And you get a little pouch with all the things that you need. Child care providers can do it. Preschool staff can do it. After school staff, coaches, faith-based people, prevention professionals, mental health professionals. What we're trying to do is make sure that everybody has access to simple strategies that work, and there's a coherent focus on well-being by the community. That is extremely powerful. You can read about that science on evidence-based kernels in pubmed.gov. Now, these can be deployed at multiple levels. So you can work at with families, schools, organizations, and community things like hospital, like Children's Hospital in Ohio. You can use some of these from birth to childhood, to adolescence, and to adulthood. And then there's an intensity variable. So some may need high intensity versions of these things or several kernels to achieve the things, but that's going to be relatively low reach. And then as Tony was talking about with the reward and reminder, that was a population level, low intensity, but high reach. And so we have this map here of how you can, in fact, scale kernels or the good behavior game up to a population level. We now have multiple states with population level implementation of Pax Tools and the Pax Good Behavior game. And that's an extraordinary advance in prevention science to get to a population level where many, many people are using the same tools and sharing and improving them. It was, quite frankly, when this all started to explode, I was brought to tears because this was the vision that I had, but I never thought I would ever see it. So do you have to read every book and journal to learn about each kernel to make it use? No. You just kind of have to learn the topography and how it works and learn to see it in real action time so that you're noticing you're becoming an active change agent in bettering the world. We are very thankful for extensive federal funding from the states and communities, and you can learn how to use these evidence-based kernels quickly and efficiently. So training and dissemination. So we have a Pax trainer, and they teach community educators who then can mentor others and disseminate the materials. They collaborate with many caring adults. And this now reaches and implements and benefits many children, teens, and adults in the communities. And it can cut across settings. So this is how we're trying to create generalization in positive outcomes for well-being. Now, I want to say, yes, we can. Multiple states have shown it's possible. And we're now collecting data on those recipes and how they can happen. Oui, nous faisons. Why does every community need simple, practical tools to help children? Well, to flatten the rising epidemic. This is the Wall Street Journal. This is the official newspaper of the Communist Party. That's a joke. Now, what they did was something that nobody else has done. They did an analysis of the amount of psychotropic medications being used by children in America. This was published in 2010, a few days after Christmas, when nobody was reading the newspaper. I want you to look at this. There's an enormous number of children getting psychotropic medications in 2009. 40.4 million kids had at least one psychotropic medication in 2009. We are now 12 years later, and I can guarantee you those rates have gone up. It keeps rising. This is Medicaid expenditures for mental health disorders. That's the largest single expense in Medicaid for children. Are psychiatric problems. Good heavens, how did this happen? This is not a problem of bad parents. This is a problem of our social ecology. And that's what we're trying to do with Pax Tools, and the Pax Good Behavior game is to change the social ecology. Yeah. And it's increasing 1 billion a year. What can we do to change the direction? Provide children with explicit teaching, social, emotional, and behavioral skills, just like learning to tie our shoes and do math problems. Behavior is adopted when it's useful and reinforced by adults and peers. We can teach these skills. Now, Tony's already outlined the nurturing environment hypothesis. This is what we're working on, and we are attempting to provide specific kernels that work in each one of these frameworks to offset the problems that we're seeing. This is the suite of tools that we have. We now have the Pax Good Behavior game that's been run in about 60,000 classrooms. That's millions of children. We have many studies. We are now actually collecting data on the kids at age 35. We have the community educator training. We have Pax Tools for school at home, and we have Pax Tools that are higher level for human services. Again, you can use these tools to teach self-regulation. This is also happening at population level in Ohio and Arizona and other states. In New South Wales, these are also being used widespread in Estonia and other countries. Now, this is what, when you use the recipe of the good Pax Good Behavior game, these are some of the things that we see in the longer term research at Johns Hopkins. 107% increase in boys attending college, a 52% increase in girls attending college. That's the reason we get that is we're reducing pregnancy. Increase in high school graduation for both boys and girls. Reducing the need for special education service, which is eating schools alive. A 32% reduction in violent crime by highly aggressive boys. A 35% reduction in alcohol abuse by boys and girls. A 40% reduction in any psychiatric service by boys. A 50% reduction in drugs by all boys. And most remarkably, this is the only elementary school strategy so far published that has reduces the risk of suicidality among young people. And this was done when they were in first and second grade. Reducing special ed, reducing opiate use. This is particularly why we've gotten quite a few resources from states and the federal government, is because Pax GBG has impact on opiate use. Now, what's the goal of all of these simple Pax efforts? There's only one real goal. That's to better our world and better ourselves. And I hope you join with us, and I hope you can spread this knowledge everywhere. I want to thank you. This is a great honor to be presenting for this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Embry, and thank you, Dr. Biglan. I think we're going to be pulling both of you back up here for some questions. We had a couple come in, and both of them are related to the same topic. You had mentioned rewards for clerks that might be abstaining from sales to minors, to help promote abstaining from sales to minors. Can you talk a little bit more about how that's implemented, what some of those rewards look like, how they're implemented, how they're tracked?
In the case of tobacco, we got kids who were looked young. We mostly had kids around 16 years of age. And we had them go to each store and they would get a couple of different items, one of which was cigarettes. And then if the clerk was willing to sell, they would say, "Oh, I don't have enough money for those, I better not get them." And so we did that in baseline just to see what percent of stores would sell. And then when we started the reward approach, and we had an adult accompanying the kids to the stores, but not in the store. And if the clerk was not willing to sell, they would give the clerk a reward. And it was usually, you know, a $5, $10 gift certificate that a business in the community had put up to do that. And we also initially would take their picture. We'd get articles in the local paper about it. And we had it so that the store, they could put it in the window of the store so that everybody, they're bragging about we're obeying the Oregon law. And so it significantly reduced sales in, like I said, in all of the 8 communities we worked in. Does that help?
I would, yeah. Can you hear us?
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Embry.
When we did this at state levels, for example, in Wisconsin, we also gave out little cards to all of the members of the legislature. Thank you for doing the right thing by not selling tobacco. And we put the names of the members of the legislature on it and gave them. And that was to sort of pre-prompt the stores to pay attention to this. And that also got nice publicity. In addition, we had the kids call into the local radio stations, to the AM stations, and say, Joe's Bait Shop in Eau Claire, they didn't sell tobacco, so could you ring their cowbell and celebrate Joe's Bait Shop for not selling? We did lots of other little things that added to this at a population level. We also had a thermometer for the entire state and for every single county on the amount of how well they did on reward and reminder. That created a bit of soft team competition. And it was, you just have to add some other PR things to make it work properly. And we also have an app for it.
Wonderful. Okay. I realize that we're at time, but I'm going to go ahead and proceed. You've only got 2 more questions, and both of them are very good. One of them is related to gang prevention, and the other is related to PAX. And I'm going to ask you the PAX first, but just for those that might need to leave, we're about to extend into a break here, and we'll be returning at 3:45 p.m. Eastern time on the next session with Dr. Fishbein. So the question around PAX is, can PAX be used by parents? And I think you were addressing some of that earlier. Is there a comparable strategy that could be used in the home? And is PAX equally effective with older adolescents as well as younger children? And maybe, Dr. Embry, before you answer that, this is a perfect time to announce that October 26th, we are hosting the Evidence-Based Practice Spotlight webinar through ADAPT. And if you sign up for our distribution list, then you'll be made aware of that event. It's also in our resource packet with a registration link. But in that webinar, you will be orienting the public and anyone who attends to the good behavior game more intimately, as well as to Pax Tools. So that's an opportunity to learn more and become more familiar with the trainings available related to that. So is Pax equally effective with older adolescents as younger children? Can it be used by parents, or are there other strategies to use in the home?
The answer is yes, but it's with some little caveats to it. So for example, as you move the good behavior game up the ladder in age, you give more and more responsibilities to the young people to run the damn thing. And that's extremely powerful. That's called meaningful roles. And we separately assess the impact of meaningful roles, but we also do some additional things like every child gets to put up what they think is their best work of the week on a public displays. Every kid has a job roster, and they also create that resume for what it is that they've done. So there's some expansions of it that are related to the developmental things. We also, with the student jobs, the kids who are the bullies and causing a lot of trouble, we have special jobs for them that are essentially for the behavior analytic people. They're differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors. It's a fancy word for giving them a job to keep them out of trouble. And you can use these same ideas for families. And my dissertation actually dealt with one of the principles, which is most people don't think about. And one of the aspects of the good behavior game is a good behavior game includes the notion, and my dissertation, thank you for not doing something, which people don't think about. So in our case, we were dealing with the third leading cause of death of young children. When people used to play outside, now they never do. We reinforced the children for periods of being safe playing outside, and we were able to reduce all of that impulsivity. So yes, these things can be twisted to these other circumstances and ages.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
The final question is related to gang prevention, and it's a loaded question, so I'm going to try to break it down. This viewer works with gang prevention and intervention related to joining gangs. One thing they've noticed, and a common denominator, is the close relationship between gang membership and drug use. Okay. During the implementation of counseling, or when those youth or young adults are engaged in counseling, some of them recognize that they do have problems with drug use. It's exposed at that time, and they're referred and accepted into other programs focused on their specific needs. In the meantime, it's necessary to work with them and to treat them. So I think the question is around, you have just talked about some fundamental units of behavior change and related it to prevention, right? This question, while it seems to be focused on treatment, I think the larger question is around prevention. Are there specific kernels, or are there things they can be doing in working with these youth involved in gangs or being identified as at risk for being involved in gangs that could prevent somehow that ultimate decision to join a gang?
Well, the answer is yes. So we actually did a project here in Tucson, Arizona. We took 20 young people who were being released from prison for gang-related activities, and we got essentially a clubhouse for them. We also used this prize bowl circumstance. So when they came in, one kid was randomly drawn every time they came in to have a drug test, and we randomized the drug test, which kind of drug test it was. So it was very difficult for them to plan for everything. Now, if that kid tested clean, that kid got to go over to a special prize box and draw a prize that was a higher value monetarily. And not only did he get it, but he also got it for his teammates in that particular thing. So they're all high-fiving each other for not getting dirty in drugs. So you can use these things in the same way for both prevention and treatment. It's a longer conversation how it's done, but the science is impeccable on these things. But we're not using those, and importantly with adolescents, they are very needful of reinforcement. The neural pruning makes adolescents more needy of positive reinforcement, but that's exactly what we withdraw in all of our legal actions, are all the reinforcements that would keep kids clean and sober and on target. And that's also partly as a result of the circumstances they're living in, but it is reversible. And I was so happy when only one kid had to go back, and that was because the legal authorities would not let me give the children omega-3 fatty acid, which would have reduced the impulsivity, which NIDA and other parts of the National Institutes of Health have studied, which reduce that impulsivity and that anger. So it's possible. Give me a call, we'll talk.
Thank you, Dr. Embry. And you answered that much more eloquently than I framed it to you. So thank you for that. And I apologize to the viewer if I didn't capture the absolute spirit of what you were trying to ask. it seems like fundamental units of behavior change. It's a concept very much like framing, which we heard about before this. You know, we're just kind of touching the surface of it in this presentation, but there are many people that are hungry for more information on it. In your resource packet, we have included the actual study that Dr. Embry has referenced, as well as a list of other additional resources if you'd like to learn more about this. And what's really neat, when we talked with Dr. Embry and Dr. Biglan at first about doing this presentation, we wanted to just bring to life the concept of these micro level behaviors that you can start doing right now. You can take home and you can do these in the home. You can share these with others, and just a little thing can have a huge impact. And so that really was the purpose of the presentation today, is understanding the value of these kernels, and especially when synthesized through programs like PAX, you know, with the potential impact that can be achieved with that. Thank you, Dr. Embry. Thank you, Dr. Biglan, for joining us today. We're so very grateful. Thank you for introducing the public to these kernels and those who weren't aware of them. And I sincerely hope that all of you will dive in and learn a little bit more about them, because the more we uncover and the more we learn how to unite them as a universal strategy, the more we will advance our level of consciousness, just like we talked about at the beginning of the summit.
And thanks
At
for
this
having
time.
us.
Thank you for letting us do this, and the Tony and Dennis Roadshow.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, at this time, we are going to wrap up and head to break for just a few minutes. It looks like maybe 4 to 5 minutes, and we will join all of you for our final session on normalizing prevention with Dr. Diana Fishbein. You won't want to miss this. We'll see you in just a few minutes.
That's right.